David M. Jacobs with us, a PhD and author, as well as researcher and associate professor of history at Temple University, as well as the founder of ICAR, the International Center for Abduction Research, is an organization devoted to the dissemination of trustworthy information about UFO abductions. The ICAR will provide accurate information to therapists and individuals who are interested in abductions and help them cope with the variety of problems that arise from the use of hypnosis and other memory collection procedures. Dr. Jacobs began researching the controversy of UFOs in America back in the mid-1960s and has amassed almost 40 years of primary research, data, and analytical hypothesis on the subject, including over 1,100 hypnotic regression sessions with abductees. David has written several books, and if you'd like to know more about Dr. Jacobs, check out his website at www.ufoabduction.com.
Melissa, who was referred to me by Bud Hopkins, I live in the Philadelphia area, he's in New York. She came from Philadelphia, so she came over to my house. I was sweating with nervousness over the fact that I was actually going to do hypnosis with somebody, having never been hypnotized myself, and but having sat in on a lot of Bud Hopkins sessions and written down every word he said and all that. And she was very much into channeling, and she could channel various entities or whatever she needed to channel. And she, in fact, offered seminars on channeling and could teach people how to do it and all that. So she laid down on a couch in my living room. I was scared to death, nervous. I wrote out an induction in a 3x5 card, and I hid it in the palm of my hand so she couldn't see it, because I didn't want her to know that I was a rank amateur, and this was the very first session. And she went into this trance-like state. She was relaxed, you know. And basically, what we had decided we were going to look at was an event where she was in a park, and she was looking at a buttercup with a friend of hers. She bent over, and then she felt arms around her waist. She was like 7 years old. She was lifted into a UFO, and that's basically what she remembered. So we looked at that, and they were in a park, and there were some kids playing baseball down on she was on sort of a slope over there, and her friend was with her, and she looked down, and there was arms around her waist, lifted her up into the UFO. The guy who was holding her had a page boy haircut, she said, which I never heard of before. But okay.
Like and a cartoon character, kind of?
Well, maybe. I had to look up what a page boy haircut looked like on the internet, you know, or wherever I looked, actually in books in those days. And it was sort of like a flip haircut, maybe like Prince Valiant or something like that. I don't know. So she told me that she knew this guy. His name was Cosmo. She had named him Cosmo. Now there's a little history to that name, which I won't go into, but okay. And she was put on a table, her clothes were removed, and this Cosmo did this an examination of her, and he did this and that and this and that, and there was a sort of a reproductive examination done of her, and she was very embarrassed to talk about that. And then he took her off the table, and he walked her down a hallway, and in the hallway, she met a gray alien, and she was required to put her hands on the gray alien's head. And when she did that, she felt love and warmth and affection emanating from him. Then when she took her hands, she was required to take her hands off. When she did that, it was gone. The feelings were gone. And then she continued walking down the hallway with Cosmo, and they went into another room, and there was a group of gray aliens who were sitting around a table. and she sat on a ledge in the by the wall, and they said that when she grows up, she's going to be intelligent, she's going to be beautiful, she's going to be smart, she's going to be strong and brave, loyal, courageous, and true. Then Cosmo took her out, put her clothes back on, took her back down. And I thought to myself, we talked a little bit about it again, then she left, and I was beside myself with excitement. I was quivering with excitement. I had done it. I'd done hypnosis with an abductee. It was astounding. It was amazing. I called up Bud Hopkins. We compared notes and this and that, and I was just thrilled, amazed, astounded. That night, I went upstairs to type out the transcript of what she said to show how old this was on my 8088 8 megahertz or 4 megahertz dual floppy Zenith computer. It had 2 floppy drives, one for your for the program and one for your what you're going to save it on, a 7-inch floppy drive.
That's top of the line.
Top of the line. It actually cost me $1,500 back in 1985 or whenever I bought it. So I thought in my stupidity that the little cassette tape recorder I put next to her would pick up every word she whispered.
Didn't
I don't
work
know
out
if
too
you heard
well,
that.
huh?
You could hear me on there just fine. You could not hear at all. Gone. The whole transcript gone. I was astonished, astounded, crestfallen, broken. I was sweating. It was, oh my God, it was awful. I lost it, this treasure, this prize. So, but she came back for another session. She came back for another session. She came back for another session. After a while, I said, now, Melissa, remember that first session we did? She said, yeah. I said, well, I had a little trouble with the tape recorder. I didn't tell her that I was just a dumb idiot. And so I said, can we do this again? And she said, sure. So she's looking at the buttercup. She feels arms around her. The guy grows up. He's got page boy haircut. His name is Cosmo. Puts her on a table, does this and that, this and that. There's a little reproductive examination she's very embarrassed to talk about. He takes her off the table, puts her clothes back on, and brings her back down. I said, now, Melissa, remember last time you walked down a hallway and you met this gray alien? You put your hands on his head and you felt love and all that stuff coming from him? She said, I don't remember that happening. I said, well, what about the time when you walked through the hallway and afterwards, and you walked into this room and there was going to be this council was set up and you were going to grow up to be brave and loyal and courageous and all that stuff? So that happened to my friend Lydia, not to me. And I knew instantly that I was an idiot and I did not know what I was doing. Even after sitting at the seat of at the foot of Bud Hopkins, watching him do session after session with people, I swore at that time that I would not let this happen again. And that's when I put controls into place. That's when the idea of asking leading questions came up, and misleading questions to see if they'll go for it, And the main thing is control so that this does not happen, because people will confabulate. They will pick up things from other people and think it happened to themselves. They will pick up things from their own memories and think that it was part of an abduction event. They will pick up all sorts of things that they've read and think it happened to them. It's confabulation. They get things wrong even when they don't pick up things. They get stories that are way out of sequence. They skip over large parts of what happened to them, don't even know it. There's a whole set of problems that goes with this particular type of hypnosis and this particular type of event, I should say, when the person is not supposed to remember. And every single abductee has this problem. Every single one without exception. Because people are abducted many, 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 many times, sometimes hundreds of times if they're old enough. And they might remember 2 or 3 instances. But this phenomenon is clandestine. It is secret. And the way in which you start secrecy is by making sure that the abductee does not remember what happened to them. So I see the ones who do remember bits and pieces because these beings are not perfect and human brains are not perfect either. So, it's enormously successful in its clandestine or secret nature, but it is not perfect. And that's how we know about the abduction phenomenon.
Is there a way to safeguard when you do these cases, these regression sessions, yourself and them from finding out that it is actually an abduction, not some confabulation like you speak of?
Before they get to my home office, they have to fill out a questionnaire. They have to talk with me on several different occasions. I have to make sure that the person I'm dealing with is a person who I can deal with. If a person has spent time in a psychiatric hospital, for example, I do not have the ability to deal with problems that might arise. I prefer to speak with people who are relatively normal, who haven't had a background of problems, and who, if I had my choice, who are PhDs and MDs and DDDs and all that sort of stuff, LLDs, I should say, and dentists and DDs. I would prefer, it's easier that way in lots of ways. But in fact, I do work with them, and I work with absolutely everybody else. It does not matter. I worked with people who've dropped out of school at very young ages and never went back. And I've worked with people who are themselves psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists of other sorts. And they all say the same thing. It doesn't really matter. However, I usually ask misleading questions in the first couple of sessions just to make sure that they're not going to believe me or answer me. The answer is usually no, that didn't happen that way. Or there's other tricks that I use as we go along. And so it's hard to do in the first session. It's less hard in the second session, and much less difficult in the third session. By the fourth session, it's pretty easy. For me, at least, that's the way I work. I think Bud was a better hypnotist than I am, and he could, Bud Hopkins could get really good stuff out of the first session. With me, it's always a little bit iffy.
The over 1,100 cases that you've been a part of, how many percentage-wise, or what percentage would you say are genuine ET abductions?
Well, these are, it's actually about 1,150, 1,160, something like that. Those are all actual abductions. The ones, I've got about 10 people who are not abductees that I've worked with. But I was testing early on. I did hypnosis with my wife. She's not an abductee, and I asked her leading questions just to see, but no, nothing. And I did hypnosis with 9 other people who might have been abductees, but I couldn't tell, and I decided they were not abductees. So they didn't make the list of 1,150 abduction accounts that I looked at.
Okay. And I have had an opportunity to speak with Barbara Lamb. She's done a whole bunch of hypnotherapy or hypnosis sessions with people that have been abducted, and she came onto our show, gave a great testimony about an encounter that she even had, because she told me that with all the experiences and people that she had talked to, she thought maybe she was losing her mind. So she actually they made contact with her, she said, and she saw these reptilian type entities. Walk us through, if you would, kind of a timeline, David, about some of these experiences. So like if we go back, let's say into the 80s, what were most of the experiences like with people that you talked to then? And then we'll go further down the timeline. Further down from then? Meaning closer to now is what I meant to say.
Oh, okay. Well, in the 1980s, people were saying essentially the same thing that they say now, although the ones that I worked with talked primarily about table procedures, which my sense was that was the entire abduction phenomenon. They get somebody, The person can be young, can be old. It doesn't really matter. The phenomenon is intergenerational. If a person is an abductee, their mother or their father was an abductee, and they have abduction events starting in early childhood, if not even earlier than that, and going into old age with fantastic frequency over and over and over again, literally hundreds of times by the time they're older. So they would describe getting on a table and having a series of procedures done to them, which I thought was an examination. In Secret Life, I wrote about them as these aliens were examining us. They were trying to make us figure out what our not only our bodies but our mentality was like. I thought that they were interested in human sexual response. That turned out not to be true at all. They're not interested in it one bit. I thought that they were having this unusual but yet examination to see what their backbone is like and what their joints are like and this and that, and if everything was working properly. And every once in a while, they would hold an alien would bring in a baby. The baby looks sort of like a cross between a human and an alien. And they would have to hold the baby and sometimes even feed the baby if they were a female. And I knew with the very first time I'd ever heard that, which is before I started doing research.
What did they give them? For food, like, were they like,
well,
here's some baby food?
Right, no, they had to feed the baby through their breasts. And I remember when Bud Hopkins first discovered that, I was astonished because I couldn't imagine how that could be possible, because the woman he was talking about had not been married, was not lactating, and therefore could not feed the baby. And she told him that. She said, I can't feed the baby. I can't do it. And they said, no, hold the baby to your breast. And I thought to myself when he told me that story that we would never be able to understand these aliens' minds because they value form over function. The form is you put the baby to the breast, but there is no function. Why would you ever want to do that?
Right.
Well, I learned later on that the woman has already been lactating. They've stimulated lactation, whether she knows it or not, and the baby will in fact be fed. And I have tons and tons and tons of cases like that. Everything is logical. There is not anything that is illogical about this phenomenon. So they would have to hold a baby. Sometimes they would see a younger, an older child, but still very young, a toddler, who they would have to have some sort of interaction with. And basically, that was it. And I sort of put out a timeline, a matrix of different events that happened all the time, things that happened most of the time, and things that happened every once in a while. Primary, secondary, and ancillary events, I called them. And they were of a physical nature, a mental nature, essentially, and a reproductive nature. I learned that women were stimulated sexually through their eyes to peak experience, at which point eggs were taken from them, sperm was taken from men, and what was happening early on was that they would take the sperm and egg and they would do something to it off camera, so to speak. And then the next time the person is abducted, a zygote would be placed inside of them, the woman. And then after about 3 months of gestation, maybe less than that, it's removed. That was what Bud Hopkins called a hybrid. And so early on, we understood that there were hybrids who were a combination of human and alien. As time went on, I began to focus more and more on hybrids who were more grown up, adolescent or adult. And there was something called a personal project hybrid, as I named him. This is a hybrid who took on, the phrase was used by one of the hybrids, who took on an abductee when she, let's just say it's a male hybrid, when she was very young, let's just say 6, or let's just say 14, but young no matter what, and stayed with that person for decades and decades and decades, for many, many, many years later, called a personal project hybrid. And I also learned that there were different types of hybrids. Some looked really quite alien, some more human, et cetera, et cetera. And I wrote a lot about those in my next book called The Threat, which came out in 1998. And that's sort of what it was. Now, when I first heard about hybrids, I had no idea what I was listening to, and it was when Bud Hopkins did a session that I was sitting in on, and this young woman said that she didn't go out much, she didn't have boyfriends, she didn't do this, she was waiting to get married to this space being who loved her and she loves him. And he would come down and he loved her and she loved him, and that's all there was to it. And her life basically was ruined because she felt that this was going to be her future. Why should she go out on dates? Why should she meet other guys? And she loved him. So I had never heard anything like that. I'm not sure if Bud had ever heard anything like that either. And she said his name was, I don't remember the name exactly, but it started. It was. I'll say the word Xanax, which is a drug, but let's say his name was Xanax, and she spelled it out for me on a piece of paper. I went out to lunch with her after the session, and it was Xanax, something like that, or X, yeah. And I told Bud that there was a problem here, because if this is a true alien and that's the way he spelled his name, he wouldn't spell it with an X. He'd spell it with a Z. He would not know that X's from the Greek are pronounced like Z's. Now he would always automatically spell it from a Z. What's the point of making it sound differently? Confusing. It didn't make any sense to me. Well, this was in fact confabulation, just like in my first session that I didn't recognize later on. But the point was, even before I started doing hypnosis, Bud was uncovering hybrids and the making of hybrids, and hybrids who were adult. And although he didn't quite know it, and we were still sort of circling around it, but it was there. And now when I take a look at the subject, it's all about hybrids. And the phenomenon, they are abducting people for 2 reasons. Number 1, to help them make hybrids. And number 2, to help them deal with hybrids. And so that's sort of what my new book is about. Hybrids who have so jumped out, so to speak, of the UFO and are now living here. Something that I never in my life ever believed I would ever say to anybody ever. But the evidence has forced me into that conclusion, unfortunately.
The question is, being able to be in that position where you can follow these people basically in these sessions and find out who abducted them, what abducted them, where they're at, get into some descriptions and details. How far do you take that? Do you ever find out where these beings come from? Are they, underground? Are they underwater? Are they out in the cosmos? Are they all over? Have they been here forever? What are some gems that you found out through these experiences?
Well, the first thing is, where do they come from? The answer to that is, I don't know and I don't care. It doesn't matter. How's that?
Okay.
And it doesn't.
Okay.
It does not matter where they're from. Not only that, there is no possibility they can tell us where they're from unless they're from one of the planets, one of the 8 planets in our solar system, which they ain't. So there's no way they can tell us. By my calculation, there are hundreds and hundreds of stars in our galaxy. I may be wrong, but I think so. Let's just say billions. lots of those billions of stars have names, maybe hundreds of them. Most of them have numbers, maybe hundreds of those. They are not going to know what number we have for their planet. You see what I mean?
Okay.
And if they come from a planet, we don't have any names for planets. All we have is names for stars. Well, maybe we do have a couple names for planets now. Now we've discovered 3,000 planets out there in the galaxy so far and counting. But it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is, are they here or not? That is the only thing that is salient to us. That is critical. People, for some reason or another, get hung up on where they're from. I don't know why. It makes no sense to me.
Well, let me interject real quick. At least if you know where they come from, you can prepare yourself. Like if you're in battle, you want to know where your enemy's coming from, right? Okay,
they come from the planet Vortex. See what I mean? It doesn't matter. They come from somewhere else, and they have advanced technology. Now, having advanced technology is the critical event here. With advanced technology, it can't be just advanced technology. That's a non-starter. Our technology is brand new. If you say it's 200 years old, that's well within the brand new. It's virtually neonatal. It's so brand new, 200 years ago. Now let's just say it's 5,000 years old, which it isn't, but let's say it is 5,000 years old. Well, that's brand new in terms of cosmic time or geologic time. It's virtually neonatal, just the same as 50 years ago or 200 years ago. So if they have advanced technology, they have extremely advanced technology. It can't just be a little advanced if they can come here and do what they're doing. It's got to be extremely advanced, and that is in fact what people describe. It's incomprehensibly advanced. Therefore, on a table, when procedures are done to them, when instruments are used, when there's machines that are over their bodies, etc., doing this and doing that, we have absolutely no knowledge of what those machines do. After all these years and all the abduction researchers and all the times, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times that we've seen these kinds of machinery that doesn't do the examinations, we do not know anything at all about their technology. People have said, scientists have said, they don't say this anymore, but it used to be a mantra that they all said ad nauseum. Well, space is big. Space is big. It's large out there. It's pretty. There's a lot of distance between places, even at the speed of light. If you were to travel even at the speed of light, which is not possible because you just turn into pure energy, but even approaching the speed of light or whatever, you can't get here from there because it's just too far away. You'd have to live to be 10 million years old, for a planet 10 million miles away or whatever it is. So therefore they can't get here from there. They don't say that anymore because now there's wormholes and there's all sorts of other ways that they might be able to approach here, and there's multiverses and maybe there's all sorts of different theories now how one can get from one place to another place in the universe. So that part has died down. In fact, it doesn't matter how they got here, just like where they're from. It is of no concern to me. I don't care. The question is, are they here or not? That is the only thing that is meaningful. Are they here or not? And if they are, what do they want?
Yeah, that's important too. What is their agenda? Has it been a steady theme throughout these experiences?
Well, we didn't realize it early on because it was hard to sort things out. But as I look at it now, after 40 years in doing abduction research, There's an arrow pointing to things, and that are a little bit disconcerting, I must say. Unlike other abduction researchers, I do not feel that this is a wonderful phenomenon. I do not think that this is that these are dancing light creatures. I don't think that they're here to heal the earth and heal us and bring rubber heels or leather heels. I don't think any of that is true. I don't hear anybody saying anything like that. I don't think that they're here because we're despoiling the universe in some way with atomic bombs. This was a big one years ago.
It still is. Even in the new
yeah,
X-Files show that just came out, they used that excuse as once Roswell happened, what they took the technology from that crash. When I say they, I'm referring to the Black Ops guys, and then they've used it for their agendas, and all the UFO sightings were actually based on government craft. So that's the new agenda that they're attempting to push, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's really very little evidence for that in my opinion. Having studied UFOs since 1965, 66, and all that, I just don't see that as a possibility. But this is an extraterrestrial event that has nothing to do with our government, and not only that, it's global. It happens around the world. We are not the center of UFO activity. This is a global phenomenon. Global. People forget that immediately. Therefore, they would be working with every Air Force, and with the old Soviet Union Air Force. What the hell do they care, And it would be, in my opinion, we live in a very different society if that were the case. But let's just put it this way. No abductee has ever said anything like that to me. And or to Bud Hopkins, I might say. Well, Bud a little bit different, but certainly not to me. Bud had a case once where a guy was in the Army and things happened to him and all that, and he seemed to think it was part of the Army, but it's hard to tell. But in fact, people around the world should be saying this, but we haven't heard that. So I stick with the evidence as I hear it. And the evidence, if it is something that has to do with American government, fine. Okay, I can live with that. I have nothing against that. Okay, great, wonderful. At least they're looking at it. They're studying it. Fine. And if they want to keep it secret, hush hush, and all the rest of that stuff, okay, I can go along with that too. At least they're studying it. At least they're looking at it. The way I think of things, though, is I don't really see the evidence as all that much strong for that happening. As I said, if it did happen, I would jump with joy. That would be fine. But I wish the government would study it. I wish the government would get into it again. Here's an oddity. Hillary Clinton has said that she would open up the classified documents relating to UFOs and let everything come out. Now, if she decides that to do that, that's fine, that's good, okay, that's great. If she decides that she wants to reopen the study of UFOs again, because the government has not publicly studied UFOs since 1969. That's a long time ago, by my recollecting. And so if they start studying UFOs, the outside shells of objects, which Project Blue Book, which lasted from 1948, was it, to 1969, Project Blue Book studied UFOs. They did not study abductions, not a chance. They didn't do anything with abductions. But abductions are critically important. UFOs are the outside shells of objects. You have to know what's going on inside. You have to know who these beings are, what they want, what is their intent, why are they here. Looking at the outside shells of objects is not going to do that for you. So consequently, if the government starts looking at UFOs again and whether UFOs are real or not, you know right away they haven't the slightest idea what they're thinking about or talking about, that they have never studied the subject before in terms of intent. And what they should be doing is dealing with abductees, regressing them on a 24/7 basis every day of the week in every country in the world. That should be happening because this is a threat to all of us. This is an existential threat. We are facing possibly, and I'm going to speak in grandiose terms, possibly the greatest single existential threat to human life that has ever existed, and that includes the atomic bombs. There has never, ever been anything like this in human history. What you have is people around the world saying the same things in the same way with the same detail, regardless of where they were born, regardless of their religion, regardless of their beliefs, regardless of their intelligence, regardless of their education, regardless of anything. There's nothing here that they can't be regardless of. They all say the same thing in the same way with the same detail. There's never been anything like this in human history, period. That has never happened before. That's an astonishing fact. So that should be happening all around the world, and it isn't. There are several governments that are familiar, that have very low-key studies of it, and they're hooked up with local organizations like in Chile, in Belgium, and in France. And they're looking at UFOs, still trying to find out whether they're real or not, you know? And that's not where serious UFO researchers are, who understand that the only way that we can deal with this subject and understand it is by getting inside the objects. And that's dealing with UFO abduction material. That gives you the intent. That gives you a sense of why they're here and all that sort of stuff.
I got to jump in real quick, David, because what you're talking about is making me think about a few people that I've had a chance to speak with here on the Leak Project that reached out to me, wanted to be on the show. And these guys had absolutely no books, no promotions, no websites, just, typical jobs, working a regular life. And this gal Kimberly that came on the show once, she's a housewife, real nice lady. She lives out by Mount Hood, and she's had these really incredible experiences her whole life. But let me ask you let me give you these specific experiences, because I want to find out if you have heard of similar ones when you've done these regression sessions. The first one is that's really powerful, is Kimberly talked about how when she was pregnant with her second child, she was abducted. She remembers being in this craft with a very long window, 2 beings on each side of her. She can't remember what they look like, but she does remember this tool or this object that comes out of the table with 3 needles in it, and it injects her directly into her stomach where she was pregnant. Then she remembers waking up next to one of her trucks that she used to have at the time, or one of her friend's trucks. She explains how she still has the scars there to this day. She has all sorts of other experiences that she shared, but that's one in particular. And then another one is, there's this guy that I've spoken with that reached out to us. He calls himself Boris Starseed. He looks like he's literally 21, but he's 42. And he says that he's got this ET DNA and such. And he lives in the Bronx. He'll go outside. He will have these telepathic connections, he says, with these ETs. He'll go outside, and you can see these strange colors that will come out of nowhere. They'll turn into like a metallic disc and then go back to a red diamond or some weird other color and shape, and it just bounces all over the place. And there's all sorts of other people that see it as well during the day. And then another one, here's one thing that I find fascinating, is there's a specific, there's some video footage that I actually have here on the Leak Project of this guy that sent it out to me, and he just got a movie contract. But I showed this video, and it hasn't really got a whole lot of movement on it. It blew my mind. I think it's legit, but it's almost one of those things that's so real that most people are conditioned not to believe, even though they want to believe, that they see it and they're like, oh, that can't be real. But you see this green looking alien look under this guy's door, and he's freaking out while he's recording it. And you can see this giant eyeball. You can see the eyelid. You can see the glare, the reflection from the eye itself. And if you overlay that face with the one from Communion, where Mr. Streetbert talks about his experience, and that actual face that was drawn was done by a professional artist that could actually do work for the police and sketches and such, and it was just, you could overlay it perfectly. So have you had people that have talked about getting abducted by green aliens, getting stuff injected in their stomach when they were pregnant, and being able to just go outside and see these incredible anomalies in the sky, talking to them and such?
Yes and no. The first one, prongs in the stomach. There are needles in the navel, needles in the stomach. This happens very often. In fact, Betty Hill, in the first American abduction case, described that. Whether it was about her pregnancy or not sure. She didn't remember what you're telling me about 90% of what actually happened to her. Telepathic communication with ETs, yes, on board a UFO or in your room when they're abducting you. If you happen to be inside a house, they'll tell you, we have to go now or something like that, and it's all done telepathically, and you can hear it in your mind's ear, so to speak. But telepathic communications with beings a distance away from you, let's just say 500 feet or something like that, that I have not heard of. I've never had that happen. Nobody's ever said anything like that. Then a metallic disc that turned into a diamond-shaped disc. Yes and no. It depends on how the angle of seeing the UFO is, what angle it's at. So that just might be something a little bit different. Green alien, not ever.
I'm telling you, I want you, if you get a chance, just take a look at this video. And for those that haven't had an opportunity to watch this podcast, that are listening to this presentation, just go back on the X-Files playlist on the youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord, folks, and you can actually see this video. It was fascinating indeed. So maybe I'm looking into it too much. I showed it to several people, and I've got mixed emotions out of it, but I definitely see this eyeball. It looks like a giant eyeball. And as I said, if you were to overlay, you can only see half of its face because it's looking underneath the door. But if you were to overlay that half of a face with the Communion alien that's drawn on the actual book cover itself, it overlaps perfectly. It's incredible. I know somebody that's very successful, has no reason to lie about being abducted. When he was in Mexico, he actually claims to have been abducted by green aliens, and I showed him the video, and he said he didn't see any connections there either. So it was interesting.
Yeah, I assume that you're talking about the book cover done by Ted Jacobs, no relation to me, for Whitley Strieber's Communion.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Every abductee who's looked at that had one major sense: it's not right. The head is too flat. The head is not big enough. The eyes are too high up. And one of the interesting things is that cover pried loose hundreds and hundreds of abductees who became frightened of it and wondered, why are they so scared of this painting on the cover of Communion? And then they would say, but they don't look like this. Their heads are different. And then they would think, why do I know that? But Ted Jacobs didn't quite realize what a gray alien looked like. However, I have seen nobody even approaching the color of green anywhere. Although people will say sometimes that the gray beings are sometimes a little bit bluish, but hard to tell. Memory plays tricks. You're not supposed to remember these things if these actual events were happening, and you're not. And since you're not supposed to remember it, sometimes the memory squeezes out in an altered form, and that can be confabulation. Having said that, looking underneath a door means, well, the way to explain that, all right,
I
I'll
know it
start.
sounds weird. Yeah, I mean,
No, I'll tell you exactly why it sounds weird, but what I'm going to say is weirder. It's not weird enough. That's what I'm saying. Uh, the problem here is that aliens can come through walls and through windows and take abductees out through walls and through windows. This is not a normal part of their ability to maneuver. They must have help from some sort of device on the UFO that shines out a sort of blue light, not quite, it's a light, but it's got bluish overtones. That light comes in a window, or sometimes it'll go right through a wall. And that is what allows people to go through windows and go through walls. In other words, when on board a UFO, neither abductees or aliens walk through walls. See what I mean? It has to be done with that machine, with that device that's on board the UFO every single time. So if an alien wanted to get into somebody's house or apartment and they just come down from a UFO, that UFO would be there and help them do it by going right through a window or right through a wall or right through a door or whatever it is. Therefore, looking underneath a door makes no sense. See what I mean?
sure. And that's one thing that I found very odd too, because obviously the technologies they have, and like you said, if they wanted to, they could definitely just walk through the door. His reasoning to it was he felt like they were trying to make contact without freaking him out too bad because they knew he was already very scared. Whatever it was. Hey, man, maybe the guy's got a Komodo dragon running around in his house, and it's just looking under the door there or something. You know, I don't know, but it was green, and it was a big eyeball, and it was a trip. So I would recommend people watching that. Just give me your opinion on what it is. Maybe it's an iguana or something, or Morris the cat was he had his fur dyed green. But if David, let me ask you, I mean, your book that you've got, Walking Among Us, just so much information in there. It's jam-packed with data and stories and accounts. Are there some other beings that you could describe to us that you've learned about throughout your years?
Well, on board the UFO, there are what you're looking for is a consolidated, compact workforce. Everybody on that UFO is part of this workforce. Everybody. That includes abductees. Everybody on that UFO is part of a workforce. The workforce ultimately is to manufacture, create beings. It is within the realm of possibility that some of the beings who are created are in fact gray aliens, and I can go into that with more detail later on, logically. But in fact, the ones in control, I think, I ascertain, I guess, are the ones who are insect-like ones, who I call insectolins. That's insect with the word alien and the E taken out. So insectolins. They give orders, everybody else takes orders. The gray aliens are workers, they take orders. There are, and I know there are reptilian type ones, and the reptilian type ones are unusual. People will see them from once in a while, from time to time. I know that if you go on the internet, there's reptilians all over the place, but that was caused by some books written about reptilians of people who don't know what they're talking about, and they are workers. They do the same jobs as the gray aliens. And if you want, I can come back and tell you my theory, my guess, my speculation on why there are reptilian-looking ones. Then comes gray aliens. Gray aliens come in two sizes, tall and small. By tall, we'll say 4 feet. By 4.5 feet. By small, 3.5 feet. Then there's what I call early stage hybrids, beings who look really human and really alien together. A person with a being is born with very large black eyes, but there's whites in the corners of them. They, unlike aliens, have hair, but it's very thin and wispy. There's a tiny little nose, a tiny little chin, a tiny little mouth, tiny little ears, not normal human size at all. I used to think, well, that's just the process of creating hybrids. And that may be that you're gonna get the ones that are half and half. But the thing is that their physiological technology, what they can do physiologically, medically, whatever it is unbelievably advanced, just like their hard technology. So my guess is now that these beings were created for a reason, as opposed to random. And what we see with these beings is they take care of babies. They're in a room with lots of babies babies are removed from fetuses, are removed from women at around 10, 11 weeks. They're placed in gestation tanks. They gestate until they're pulled out, and then they're taken care of by these early stage hybrids. Middle stage hybrids, who look more half and half than before, and who don't have such big eyes, and there's more whites in them, don't have any hair on their body except on top of their head, not as thin, thicker, and so forth. They take care of older kids, 10, 11, 12 years old, like that, Then there's humanoid, or late stage hybrids, who are often, everything about them looks human, except maybe their eyes are too large, and there's no bodily hair. They sometimes become personal project hybrids, and will stay with somebody for decades. The females oftentimes will take care of older kids also. Then there's what I call humanoid hybrids. And they are humanoid in almost every way, or even just a human stage. They except in their minds, except in their brains. For example, they might be security hybrids to help keep hybrids who are going to be living here safe and secure, and make sure that the abductees are kept in line and they're not telling anybody, because this is an enormous secret and nobody's supposed to know. Their minds are one-track minds. That's all they think of, and that's security, and keeping the abductee in line and the hybrid safe. That is all they think of, period. That is their function. That is their task. Then there's what I call hybrids, human hybrids. You just put those two words together, and they're the ones who are actually moving into the society. Now, having said that, people would ask me from time to time, years ago, do you think that they're walking among us? Do you think they're living here? They're living among us, walking among us? I loved that question. It was my favorite question in the world, because I got to say, absolutely not. There's no evidence whatsoever that they're living among us. And I felt good saying that, because I didn't have to be crazy then. I could be sane. Absolutely not. Starting in 2003, I began to hear something I had never heard before. Now, by 2003, I had done one hell of a lot of abduction sessions. And people had described hybrids, this and that, and this and that. But one guy who I was talking with, who was a businessman in his 50s, who had never heard of me, didn't know anything about abductions. It was recommended by a psychiatrist to come and see me because he had these sort of memories of these odd things happening to him that the guy who recommended me knew that it sounded abduction like. And he was perfectly sane. In around our fourth session, and if you're listening to this, pardon me if you've heard it before, because I've talked about this a lot, but he says to me, I just remembered. I have a friend. I have a friend. Yeah. I just remembered I have a friend, and I'm thinking to myself, I got a friend too. I got a lot of friends. Um, so he says, no. He says this friend's a really good friend of mine. Yeah. He's really, really good friend of mine. Known him for a long time. He's my best friend. We've been to dinner together. We've been to foreign countries together. We've been fishing trips together. We've been here. We've been there. I see him all the time. He's my best friend. It's funny. I totally forgot about him, he says to me. And he also didn't know what his friend's last name was, where his friend was from, whether his friend worked or not, whether his friend was married or not, or whether his friend went to sleep or not, or whether anything about his friend, where his friend lived. Didn't know anything at all, not even his last name. But he was his best friend. So we did a session on that when he first saw him or whatever, and then a bunch of sessions on that. And turns out he's meeting with his best friend all the time, including on the way to my house to do a session, as his best friend was trying to prevent him from doing that, from going there and talking to me. Literally, just before he arrived. To my amazement. But I thought to myself, well, this is so unusual. I'm going to wait until other people say the same thing, because it might be an outlier of some sort and maybe something wrong with the guy's brain, Then another person began to say similar things, not exactly the same, but similar things. So they were dealing with this guy who looked human, and they were training him to do this and teaching him to do that, and on and on and on and on. They would have dinner with him, and on and on. And then another one came to say something similar, and another one came to say, and a woman who I've been working with since 1987, Karen Morgan, who made it into all three of those books, Secret Life, The Thread, and Walking Among Us. She began to say something like that. And then there was another one who was in Secret Life, was in The Threat, Allison Reed, who began to tell me things like that. Then I began to look through my files, and I noticed that other people had been telling me things sort of like that, and other aspects of it that I had just sort of put off to the side and forgotten about because nobody else was saying that. And consequently, I realized something was happening. This is different. Things are different now. Oh God, brain, don't fail me now. In The Threat, my second book on abductions, these aliens, the gray aliens, would tell the abductees, soon there's going to be a change. It's going to be wonderful. You're going to love it. The change is coming soon. Soon there's going to be a change. Everybody's going to be happy. Everybody's going to know his place. So I'd ask them, well, what do they mean by the change? The abductees did not know. I said, well, what do they mean by soon? Because soon is not a word. It could mean, for them, 10,000 years from now or 10 minutes from now, for all we knew. And they said nobody knew. They didn't know. Abductees did not know. So then abductees would be brought into a room and look at a screen on the wall, a screen-like device is the best way I can put it. And there's a picture, and these are two actual cases, a picture of a picnic. And it's like a moving picture. There's people who are grilling. There's a one of those table with benches on it there, and they're making something on the grill. There's some kids playing ball, and there's a little lake by it, and et cetera, et cetera. Everything is perfectly normal, and they hear in their mind's ears, so to speak, they hear telepathically, "Can you tell the difference between you and us?" And the abductee stares at that screen and says, difference? What do you mean? I don't see any difference. Everybody looks the same. And it's like, then they hear this telepathic voice saying, see, isn't that wonderful? Soon we will all be together. Soon everyone will be happy. Then another abductee tells me a story about how she sees this, what looks like a photograph, and it's of people like standing on steps, like a school photograph or something like that, except there's only about a dozen people. And she's staring at this thing, wondering why she's looking at this photograph. And she hears a voice that says, can you tell the difference between us and you? And she says, no, everybody is exactly the same. once again, same thing. See, isn't that wonderful? Soon everybody is going to be together. Soon everyone will be happy, etc., etc. That was before any of this stuff happened in 2003. That was, years before. So I began to realize, well, maybe this is the change that we're looking at. Maybe this is the change. Or maybe it's the beginning of the change, and the actual change will happen in the future. I do not know. The people who are living here, who are moving in, need help. They can't do it themselves. Their story is they have been watching humans, talking with humans ever since they were children, usually in a classroom situation. One of the things I put in one of my books, I think it was the threat, was a woman is standing in front of a classroom. Now, they're sitting on very weird seats. Which I won't go into now, but there's an image of a dog on the wall. And the kids ask this woman, who's the abductee, standing in front of them, "What's a dog for?" And she says, "Well, people have dogs for companionship and for love and fun and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." "Do you eat dogs?" No, we don't know. We don't eat dogs. No, we don't eat dogs. At least not in America. Then there's a picture of a goat. "What's a goat for?" "Well, with a goat, you can get milk, and you can turn the milk into cheese. And do people eat goats?" Well, she said she's a vegetarian, so she doesn't eat goats. But some people do eat goats, yes. And so they're learning about flora and fauna, let's just say. And you can have a lot of abductees teaching them about a lot of things by the time they grow up to live here. I would say that maybe that's 1% of what they should know to live here. So when they come here, when they reach the age of late adolescence or early adulthood, they start to move in singly as independent hybrids, as I call them, or as or in groups of 2, 3, or 4 in apartments for reasons I'm not exactly sure of, but there's more of them, I think, than there are of independents. They know nothing. They have to be taught everything. The independent hybrids, even though they have had intensive studies of humans, sometimes when they're 10 years old, 11 years old, they come into with a caretaker. They come down to an abductee's house, and the abductee shows them what a television is, and what a stove is, and what a refrigerator is, and what goes in a refrigerator, and what goes in a cupboard, and cans go in a cupboard. And then they ask questions, well, why don't you put the cans in the refrigerator? And they wonder what an ice cube is, and they wonder all these other things, that they have never seen. They've never seen a refrigerator in their lives. And by the time they get to be adolescents and adults, they come here and they are dumb as rocks in terms of what they know about how to be a human being. The amount of information that they have to be a normal human being in society is fantastically huge, even though they have spent a life trying to learn about how to live on Earth. Because the amount of stimulation you get just walking down the street and people brushing up against you and this and that is brand new. Everything has to be explained. And that's what abductees do now. A percentage of abductees primarily help hybrids who are moving in. They teach them how to operate a telephone. They teach them what a shopping cart is and how to go shopping. They teach them what a loaf of bread is. They teach them what eggs are. They teach them 10 billion things about normal life that everybody knows through simple living here and absorption. By the time a kid is 5 years old, he knows all those things. He knows what a fork is, what a spoon is, what a knife is, what television is, what his iPod is. He knows a huge amount by simple observation. But the hybrids don't have that. Not only that, they have these other oddities. They don't know how old they are. They've never had a birthday. Don't know what it is. A birthday party. They don't know when they were born, or should I say when they were taken out of a gestation tank. There's not a log of the date, that they were removed. So they have to guess at their age. They'll say, I think I'm a 22, or maybe between 22 and 24. That's my guess, So abductees have a huge role to play in keeping them safe, in teaching them how to live here on Earth, in teaching them how to respond to conversation that they might have on the sidewalk with somebody. Hey, you got a light? Got a light would mean nothing to them. They don't know what that even means. They'd have to learn what that is, and they have to say, oh, sorry, I don't smoke, something like that. Or any number of other of these casual conversations you have with people who just might come up to you on a sidewalk or whatever, or if you come up to a cash register pushing a cart, the person behind the cash register has to say, says, how you doing? You can't just stand there and stare at them. You have to answer. You have to say, fine, thanks, or whatever. All these things have to be learned, if you can imagine that. It's not normal for them. All conversation on board a UFO is telepathic. They don't understand humor. There is no humor in telepathy. There's no sarcasm. There's no lifting of one eyebrow, meaning that you're saying something, but you mean something different. There's none of that exists on board a UFO. They have to learn that from the beginning. And that's what this book, Walking Among Us, is all about. How do you train hybrids or hubrids just to live here? And it's not, I look at it and all I can do is get scared. Because the thing about hybrids and all hybrids is they all have one thing in common. They can totally and completely control human minds.
I got to jump in real quick, if I may. Because what you just said, and there's that echo again, if you just turn it down a little bit. So I'm thinking about all of the TV series out there now that are pushing these mutants with special powers, like the TV series S.H.I.E.L.D. that's out there now, where they're called Inhumans, and they have these...
What's the TV series called?
It's called S.H.I.E.L.D., which is based on a comic book. Yep. And the characters in there, you've got the Inhumans, which have special superhuman powers, and then you've got TV shows like Heroes, where they've got superhuman powers, this transhuman movement that's being pushed, all of the movies out there in Hollywood where they've got some type of underlying theme, and many of them, like that Superman movie that came out a few years ago, not the most recent one, where they've got the aliens that come down and attack Superman, and first they want to change the atmosphere so it's more acceptable to their bodies because of where they come from. And you look at all the chemtrails out there now, and you kind of speculate with the conspiracy realms out there, hey, is there some type of connection? Is there a reason they're genetically modifying the atmosphere so much? I mean, what are the reasons for this? And all of this push for this special breed of individuals that have superpowers that are above us and we should look at like gods. It really seems like that's this overall agenda of what they're pushing. So what you're talking to me about right now, and the book that you put together, Walking Among Us, I think that kind of goes hand in hand with the media today. And let me add to this.
I sure hope not.
Well, I mean, do you feel that these people that are walking among us are in high levels of politics and corporations and government positions that have very sensitive data so they can pass certain bills and come up with certain movies to, kind of orchestrate certain archetypes? And because as well as I do, I mean, you've got a lot more education than myself about how powerful the media is, and it's so easy to control the masses with programming now.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that everybody loves a good conspiracy, but I don't see the evidence for that. And you have to remember that I didn't start that. On one hand, we knew about the telepathic ability to control humans by gray aliens and the insect-like ones and the reptilians, et cetera, from the very beginning. That was always there. That was always there. In fact, it was there from the first accounts we ever heard about the abduction phenomenon as well. But what I'm saying is that these hybrids retain the same skills of controlling humans that all aliens use on board a UFO, and they can do it while they're here. So if you think somebody is an alien, a hybrid who's hanging around somewhere, and you come up to them and you say, "I know who you are," what you will think is, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else. I'm sorry. Goodbye." That's what you'll think.
They'll Jedi mind trick you.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, we've known about this phenomenon of controlling people for decades and decades and decades. What I'm saying is these people now look human and can still control people. They can make them see whatever they want to see, do whatever they want them to do, or think whatever they want them to think. And this makes us a second-class citizen and them a first-class citizen. And this, for me, is exactly the opposite way I want it to be. I want to be a first-class citizen, and I want them to be second-class citizens, and that would be fine with me. But that is not what is happening. We're dealing with a superior technology and a superior neurological technology, so to speak. And that is what everybody is saying and has been saying in terms of gray aliens and the other ones for years and years and years and years and years. Reaching into the upper echelons of government, the only person I can see, well, no, I was about to make a joke, but never mind.
Just do it.
Passions are too high. It's the season now. But
who do you think's the shapeshifter?
Well, there's a lot of politicians who can pull the wool over people's eyes. I'll tell you that. So if I see, I can play the middle of the road there. The fact is, though, that this is to me, this is a frightening business. I never, ever, ever in this world imagined that I would be scared of this phenomenon. I never imagined when I first started doing this 40 years ago that I would be involved with something that I fear and that I hate. I dislike this. It's extremely unpleasant for me. I don't want to hear these things that people are telling me. And in fact, before I wrote this book, I would tell people, now, I don't want you to tell me anything that I'm going to think is bad. Don't tell me anything bad. You are not to say anything bad. And then I would do this induction in hypnosis. They couldn't care less what I just told them. It didn't matter to them at all. They just told me what's happening to them and what these beings are doing and this and that, and everything was bad. So I told you not to tell me anything bad. People didn't care about me at all when they were remembering their memories, and they were. So this is obviously happening in my estimation. Now people think I'm nuts, and maybe they're right. But there are an awful lot of people who've told me that. And as I said, I went back into old files I had, and I realized that there were abductees at that time who were also doing things that aliens do. And I have a whole chapter on making abductees into alien workers. They are workers anyway because they're helping hybrids. But I mean, finding hybrids who have nothing to do with them somewhere in another state. with their minds, things like that, which I talk about in the chapter. I don't like to talk about this at all because it's too upsetting for a lot of people. And but I do write a chapter on it because as an academic, I gotta say what people have told me, whether I like it or not. And there's some perfectly awful things that happen in there. And so I'm to bring this account full circle. I don't see any loving brotherhood of the planets type healing phenomena that's going on. And I would love to. It would be great. It would be wonderful. But that's just plain not what people tell me.
Well, and let's look at the past, I don't know, 25 or so years in Hollywood. Let's maybe even go a little bit further, 30 years. You know, as E.T., you had this nice, happy extraterrestrial that comes down and shares Reese's Pieces and everything's good. And then you've got Alf and, you know.
Totally harmless, yeah.
Right, and now it's Independence Day, it's Cloverfield, and it seems like there is this transition there. And that makes me wonder also if one species is making contact with us from another planet or another dimension or solar system, interdimensional, whatever name you want to put to this entity or these these creatures or people or beings, there must be other ones out there, and they can't all be bad. I mean, certainly there's got to be a balance somewhere. I mean, you haven't talked to people that have said, hey, this is my experience. They gave me this ability to heal others or see into certain futures, or is it all 100% just experiments, torture, bad stuff that took place?
Well, it's not torture necessarily, but it's not an experiment either. As I used to think it was an experiment, the experimental model, as I called it, but it turned out not to be that. But I don't. I'm not sure. Here's the thing. Scientists years ago were a lot stupider than they are now about this subject. Now they are rock bottom stupid, yet they were even stupider in the past. And I don't care what scientist it is. It doesn't matter. They're all the same when it comes to this subject. All of them. The only one who we have a glimmer of hope about is Michio Kaku. And Michio Kaku has enough intelligence to realize that the abduction phenomenon might be real. He's not going to act on it, but he doesn't dump on it, which is to me a victory, and I applaud him for that. But you cannot make an argument. Well, let me start at the beginning. Years and years and years ago, people would say, "Well, we're probably the only people in the universe because the air, the way in which Earth was formed was unique. The way in which life formed on this was probably unique, and we have an object hit the side of the Earth and became the moon or something, and it knocked it off its axis by 7.5 degrees, which allowed us to have seasons, as opposed to baking on one side and freezing on the other,
Right.
And spun it and all that sort of stuff. And then there's so many comets hit the Earth that it created these huge oceans, enormous oceans, and the whole damn world is filled with water. And that allowed for life. And then the dinosaurs, and then eventually the destruction of the dinosaurs, allowing for primates to take hold, and all those sort of things happened here. And it's hard to imagine that they could have happened anywhere else. This was called the rare earth theory, and a book was written about it by scientists talking about how it's unlikely that there's other advanced technological life out there. So scientists have gotten away from that, and they said, well, there probably is life, and they found liquid water on Mars. When you're going to find liquid water, you're going to find life. But all scientists who are not involved in the UFO phenomenon, which means 99.99999% of scientists, think that if there is life out there, it's probably tiny little microbes floating in water, swimming around. But that's life. And the reason they say that is because it took us a couple of billion years or whatever it was of living in water, for us to crawl out of the water and become creepy crawly things on land, you know. And therefore, what they look for is creepy crawly things that are not on land but in the water. That's that they all talk about that. And sometimes they'll even talk about some creepy crawly things that are on land. They never talk about technology. That's why they're stupid. May I say that? I hate to say that. I sound aggressive.
You stupid idiots.
If there's any life at all, and there's 10 trillion planets out there who are in the Goldilocks zone. We've already discovered 3,000 planets, a bunch of which are in the Goldilocks zone. That means that there's probably 1 billion planets out there in the Goldilocks zone. I mean, let's just say 1 million even. That doesn't mean anything. 1 million is a little tiny number.
David, let me ask you a question real quick. Let's go even just real quick. If there is infinite space, which I think it is, I mean, it probably just continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. I mean, do you really think that there's a stop? You know, like, is there going to be a brick wall there? You're going to get to the end of space and, oh man, I can't go any further. It says do not enter. It just, so maybe it just keeps going. But with that being said, if it's infinite, if it's countless, then that means there's countless planets as well. I mean, so it's mathematically impossible not to be intelligent life out there.
It is not only mathematically impossible. We are intelligent life out there.
Yeah.
Now, if you make an argument that there's only two, there's us and the beings who are abducting us and who are living here and all the rest of that stuff, that is not an argument. When you say you can't make a case for two, when you say two, you mean 2 billion. Because once you say two, it's Katie bar the door. It's the floodgates are open. The water's coming in now. You can't say two. Two is nuts. Two is really stupid. There's got to be 2 billion minimum. All right, 2 million minimum. I don't care. There's lots of them out there who may be more advanced than the technology that these beings have, or maybe they're less advanced. Now, if they're less advanced, they wouldn't have any technology at all. If they're less advanced according to our own technology, you know, but there has to be more out there. Therefore, it is possible that other aliens are coming to Earth, looking around, seeing what the flora and fauna is like, and leaving. That's possible. I can't say no. We don't know. But what we do know is that the abduction phenomenon has gone on for a significant part of the 20th century, with a certainty dating back to the 1920s, and with less certainty to the 1890s, with double that certainty to the 1930s, and with a ton of them in the 40s and so forth. So it's been going on for most of the 20th century, and we don't see or know for sure whether any other beings are here. If they are here and looking around and flying off, it doesn't matter. We don't care. The only thing that matters is the beings who are here, who are putting hybrids on Earth, who are have been here for years, who have created millions of abductees, millions. And if you want, I can tell you how we got to that number. But that is a legitimate number. And if you're talking about global abductees around the world, many, 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 many more millions. 307 million is a good number to judge how many abductees there are around the world.
How did you come up with that number?
How much time do we have here?
Just a real quick synopsis.
Okay, here's the thing. My colleague Bud Hopkins and I, along with John Mack and Ron Westrom and other people, put together a poll in 1991 of 6,000 people across the country, randomly selected by the Roper Poll Organization, to see whether or not they were abductees. They were told to answer 10 questions, and all the polls were collected, et cetera, and then we analyzed them. The number that we got of people who might be abductees was much too high. It was ridiculous. So we tightened the questions up enormously. They had to answer yes to, of the 10 questions, they had to answer, we divided them into 5 higher, 5 lower answer questions, lower relevant questions. They had to answer 8 questions minimum before they could make the final count. That meant that you could answer 7 questions or whatever it was. No, you had to answer 2 questions. So, yeah, you had to answer. Yeah, at least. Oh no! Wait, no, sorry, I'm getting this. You had to answer 4 questions.
Okay.
Out of the top 5, so you could answer yes to the top 8 questions, and not make the poll. When we got that, we got the number down to 2% of the American public is an abductee. That's a wrong number. That made national news, but it's wrong. It's probably closer, and I'm going to be conservative here, to 5%. That means 95% of Americans and of the world's global population are not abductees. Now 5% of 300 million is about 15 million, and 5% of 7.4 billion is about 314 billion or 312 billion, whatever it is, in the world. In other words, millions and millions and millions of people are abductees. Now, supposing you believe that's all nonsense, between Bud Hopkins and I, we have gotten tens of thousands of letters from Americans talking about their abduction experiences and thinking that they're abductees who are serious people. They have to find out where we were. Bud died in 2011. To find out where I am, they have to come to my website that hasn't been changed since 1999. They have to do all sorts of gyrations and gymnastics to get to me. And I still get an overwhelming amount of mail now from all over the world. And in other words, there's one hell of a lot of abductees out there around the world, an enormous amount. And it can't be denied. It's staggering how many abductees are out there, all of whom are helping create and deal with hybrids, either by donating sperm or eggs or doing whatever else is necessary for them. This is a big time program. A lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of beings, so to speak, involved with this phenomenon. This is a major event. This is, as I keep saying, an existential threat. This is extremely serious business. I know I'm lighthearted about it and all that, but it's extremely serious. There's never been anything like this before. This is new in human history, even if it's not happening. Because if it's not happening, we have discovered something unbelievably significant, as I said before, about neurology, how the brain works, all around the world, all saying one thing, this same thing, all saying it together, all describing the same instruments. There's never been anything like it. No matter what it is, there's never been anything like it in human history.
Have you heard of Daryl Sims?
Sure.
Okay, so the guy is very well educated. He was in the CIA for a lot of years. He might probably still be in there, even though he says he's not. And nice guy. I've talked to him a couple of times over the years. And one of the interviews we did with him here on the Leak Project, he was discussing how he feels the extraterrestrials that have abducted him and his son and other people that he knows were actually clones. He says they have no belly button, and he talks to them as like models. He goes, well, you've got the Nordics, they're the Corvette model. You've got the reptilians. You've got the grays, different levels of grays. And he said there's the mantis aliens. And one of the things that he discusses is he doesn't think that any of them are in control. He thinks they're all just cloned. And when I tried to get to the real meat, and say, hey, who is it then? He was reluctant to give us all the information just because he deals with multiple encounters, or experiencers, and does these regression sessions, and he doesn't want to give away all the inside scoop so people could listen to it and then say, oh, well, this is what happened to me, this is what I saw. So, but this information he did give us, he said there was always something or somebody there kind of in the background, kind of watching it all and kind of like, think of the smoking man in X-Files behind the scenes, just watching everything, and he wouldn't say who it was or what it was. And he's more of a religious person. He kind of believes in, I think, the Abrahamic, religions and texts. So he feels they're like fallen angels, I think. But what is your take on that aspect and possibility?
Which aspect?
All of these being cloned from one
clones?
specific species up there at the top level.
Yeah, I don't think that the insect-like ones are cloned. I don't think the reptilian ones are cloned. I do, however, think that it is highly possible that the gray aliens are clones. Number one, they have no sexual apparatus. Therefore, it's really tough to recreate themselves. Number two, and this has always bothered me, I take a look at their eyes. Okay, I'll deal with that. That's fine. Then I take a look at their ears. Got to have ears. They got little holes in the sides of their heads because if something falls, they got to be able to look over and see what that was. It's a survival feature. A nose. Okay. A mouth? No. It always bothered me. Why do these gray aliens have a mouth? They do not breathe. They do not open their mouths. Some abductees have said they have. I think it's confabulation. They don't have any teeth, and they don't eat through their mouths. They eat through skin absorption. Why do they have a mouth? And then I realized that these beings probably have this little bit of human DNA in them, which would cause them to have that mouth and the bodily shape. But how are they born, since we don't see baby aliens? But then again, we don't know the backstory of a lot of these things. We don't know what's happening in the back of, when they're producing hybrids and gray aliens in one way or another. We don't have any knowledge of that at all. But it is possible that they could be clones. Now, are they going to be clones back to babyhood and then grow, or is there a different way of cloning that might be almost like stamping them out of a die? Because we don't really see age on them. And the answer is, I don't know, but Sims might be right in that some of these beings might be cloned, but we really don't know. Now, we can clone things because it's all brand new and it's super hot, and oh my goodness, and oh my gracious, 100 years from now, we'll look at that and laugh. So, you're looking at technology that is more advanced on all levels. That's the thing. Now, that brings me back to reptilians. Reptilians, I'm guessing. Insect-like ones, by and large, do not come and abduct people. Gray aliens do and hybrids do. That's what I've been hearing over and over and over and over and over and over again. When they get on board, they might see an insect-like one, watching the proceedings or doing something else or whatever it is. There had to be a time when there was no abduction phenomenon, when there was nobody visiting Earth for any reason. When this group came here, they had to say to themselves or to somebody else, maybe a higher up somewhere, this is the one, we'll take this one, meaning Earth. Now, if this is going to be yet another program of hybridization, takeover through hybridization, then if the insect-like ones who are the head guys don't go down and get people, they had to bring a workforce with them. Those were the reptilians. They were the first ones to go down and start getting people, I think, because the insect-like ones don't do that. And when people see them now, once they got enough people, they began to take eggs and this and that, and they got the gray aliens. That's my guess. And they're still getting them. They have to have more and more and more and more and more and more gray aliens because of the population explosion in the Earth. So the reptilians, people hate. They are reported every once in a while. Every once in a while, the abductees will report them. I'll do 20 sessions with an abductee, and then on that 21st they'll say, "This guy is really weird looking. Looks like oh man, keep him away from me. I don't like him." Ooh, And then they say, "I might have seen this guy before too. Oh God, he's horrible. Take him away from me. Then get him away. He's terrible. He's terrible. I hate him. I hate him. I hate him." And I'll say, "My God, well, is he hurting you? Is he harming you in some way?" No, I just hate him. Well, is he threatening you in some way? No, I just get him away from me. I hate him. I hate him. He gives off the aura of threat. When he begins to deal with the abductee, he does the same procedures as the gray aliens do. So he's just a worker. He's a worker, like the rest of them. But my guess is they are real aliens also, as opposed to clones or hybrids that the gray aliens might be, or all the other hybrids. I think that they were the original workforce. I may be wrong about that. This is pure speculation. But they had to have a group who first came down and got people. And my guess was it wasn't the gray aliens with their mouths. It was the reptilians. That's my sense of it. That is pure speculation. I do not have evidence for it. It's just logic for me.
Well, and I'm thinking of the movie Jupiter Ascending, and the person that is basically the crown, it looks like you or me. Just looks like a regular human, and then he's got reptilians and these other entities under him, because there has been a lot of speculation that these Draco reptilian aliens are at the very top levels of these, archetypes of certain ET species that come down, and whether they harvest humans for food or, whatever else you hear on the internet and in certain experiences that people claim to have had. So have you ever, let me ask you this, David, what is the scariest thing that you have ever heard in one of your regression sessions?
Well, it's not so much this, what you're looking for is patterns all over the place. And so, two scary things happened. A person was abducted. I had a get together for abductees, which I used to have all the time. And she was abducted in my driveway when they went to leave my house. That sort of gave me a thrill. There was, I'll be writing a book about this later on, but there were aliens who were trying to find out where I lived, because they did not want a particular person to work with me anymore, and I was working with her on the phone and in person, and then on the phone, and then through AOL instant messaging of all the damn things in the world. This was years ago, and they were desperate to try to find out. They couldn't get her to stop, so they wanted to get me to stop, and that was personally frightening. I must say that was the most frightened I'd ever been in this phenomenon. But most of the stuff is, you hear it so many times now that it just becomes. I remember before 2003, there was only one thing that ran through my mind when I did a regression session with an abductee, and that was, keep awake, don't fall asleep, Jacobs, don't fall asleep, keep awake, because I'm hearing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again. And of course, I've just done an induction, and the person's laying there really relaxed. I'm pretty relaxed too, and and sometimes somebody would say something really, really interesting, and I think about it and think really hard about it, and I realize I'm dreaming. And I snap to it. What happens next then? I say, one time, Allison Reed said to me, "David, are you asleep?" I said, "Oh, huh? Who, me? Oh, no, not me. What happened next?" God, it was awful, because, but that's good, because you want to hear things over and over again, and it's the standard patterns that you're hearing, But when you've heard them a couple of hundred times, if not more, maybe 1,000 times, it can be what they used to say in the 19th century, a sore trial. It can be really difficult listening to the same thing over and over again. But without that, you wouldn't be talking to me now. If everybody's account was different, then obviously it would be psychological and would not be coming from the outside, it'd be coming from the inside of their brains.
Right.
So, but those two events were kind of scary, and I must say that there's this guy named Bernard who's the 50-year-old businessman I talked about in Walking Among Us, and he mentioned that the guy he called Eric had told him not to come to my house just before he came to my house. They had a talk about a mile away from here. There's a little river, and they were sitting by the sides of the river, and he was trying to convince Bernard not to come to me, but Bernard came anyway, and that sort of gave me a thrill. This guy was this close to me, knew where I was, and was trying to convince Bernard not to come and spill the beans to me, you know. So, but I'll be writing a book about that later also. Not that particular case, but about this whole series. There was another series of events that happened that was very, 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 very frightening. Most of the time when I'm here alone doing sessions, it's not frightening at all. It's just soporific. That means sleep-inducing.
It would be crazy if you were doing a session and then all of a sudden, poof! It's like, where'd he go? He just got abducted right in front of me. That'd be incredible.
That would be interesting. That would be interesting. But people are abducted when they're going to be missed the least. This happens at night. They don't have to be asleep, but they can be at home. This happens. It's not going to happen usually, although it does once in a while while they're at work. It's not going to happen in the stands of a Super Bowl, but when they'll be missed the least. So, for example, once I examined a 5-day event. That's 5 days with a man, a woman, her husband rather, and a baby. And during that 5-day event, they had just moved to Florida. They did not have any friends in Florida. They had just rented a place, and neither of them had a job yet. So nobody missed them. And I have 24 hours of testimony about that event from Allison Reed. And I did a 2 or 3 day event with someone once, and when they're going to be missed the least, you know. And that means that a lot of them take place at night, you know, when they're in bed or when they're watching television. The majority of the people who I've investigated, now this is not a huge majority, but it is a majority. The majority of those people are awake. Now, the reason I say that is because there are debunkers who say that this is all sleep paralysis. Now, sleep paralysis comes up in the scientific or stupid community, not the scientific community, but the really stupid ones who are debunkers every once in a while. They know nothing about the history of this phenomenon, so they think that they've invented sleep paralysis, not knowing that 15 years ago somebody else brought up sleep paralysis and there was a huge brouhaha over it and whether people were actually having sleep paralysis and this and that, and then it died down. Now it's come back up again. The majority of people I have worked with have had their abductions when they were not asleep. End of story. That's the end of sleep paralysis. I can say that absolutely. That's all I wanted to say.
Nice. Yeah, the sleep paralysis thing, I feel, is just I saw this disc in the sky. No, you didn't, sir. That was swamp gas from Uranus. It's, one of those things that there's not a whole lot of, justification for it. You can just say, I saw this. And that's one of the things here at the Leak Project, David, is we interview people from all over the world on different aspects and points of view. One day I might have a guest on that doesn't believe in ETs, that does his best to debunk them. And then I speak with people like yourself and others that have been abducted and talk about their experiences. So that's what I try and do here, is get different aspects and different opinions from everybody and let people make their own decision based upon their discernment and what they feel is right and what their gut's telling them. So it's nice to get your point of view. And if we are in a possibility of maybe we're going to get ready for dire straits, everything you're telling me, David, it just reminds me of all of these movies that are out there in the media today. People that listen to Leak Project know that I'm very well versed in the subliminal programming that the media does on the masses, because I've been studying it now for almost 20 years, ever since high school. And it's just turned into an absolute science. What used to be MK Ultra, where they had select subjects that they did programming on, they've been able to take that experience and knowledge and get into a whole other level now with the special effects and the way they can control people in the media. But one thing that is interesting is you brought up how these extraterrestrials, these space people that have these psychic abilities to control anything. Well, if that's the case, I would think, why aren't they in power now? And that would give them a perfect opportunity to be the spokesman on some, television show or political landscape. And they've got so much influence, then the masses are watching them. Who knows, they're not already in power.
Well, one of the things I noticed about them was they asked no questions whatsoever about American governmental institutions or social institutions or economic institutions or anything like that. I don't even know if they knew that they existed. And it never came up in any questioning on board a UFO or anywhere. They did not know the name of the country that they were living in, and certainly did not know the name of the state that they were working in, or whatever it was. It all had to be explained to them. And so my sense is that in the future, we will be existing under their leadership, not ours. That's the way I look at it.
That's exactly what these TV shows are pushing. That's unbelievable. Everything you're telling me right now, the parallels are frightening. So it's almost as if they're conditioning the masses right now so that they're going to accept their
conditioning is not so much it. It's people who know who are learning a little bit about abductions because it's on television all the time and this and that, and using it in the movies. But you have to be very careful about this, because you got to remember that the abduction phenomenon started in the early part of the 20th century. And so it's only recently that they've been into this, but the phenomenon has been going on for almost 100 years now.
Do you think they had anything to do with like Machu Picchu and the pyramids?
I don't think they go back that far. Now, we'll never know, but I don't think so. I think that we would see it if it started at that time. I think that we would see it spreading out through a slow growing humankind. It would be spreading out rapidly then, and people had a lot more kids then than they do now, and plagues would come and kill a lot of people and so forth. It's only now that we've had this enormous population explosion since I was born, and until now, and consequently. Right now, it just keeps up with the population. It doesn't exceed the population. But if the population remained relatively stable, let's just say in the 16th century, by the end of the 17th century, everybody on Earth would have been an abductee. I had a PhD mathematician work it out once, and there's no evidence that not only not everybody on Earth, but not even 25% of people were abductees. And if that were the case, we'd know it. It would be in dream material. It would be in notations that people would remember. There'd be bleed through memories. We'd know it, but we don't know it, and that's not a good sign for it happening much earlier.
Indeed. And just a couple more questions before we close out tonight. Really appreciate you coming on the show here with us, David. This has just been a pleasure to speak with you. The insectoids that you brought up at the beginning, and also we talked a little bit about this before the show. What can you tell us about them? Well,
they will sometimes perform procedures like gray aliens do. That happens. They're active members of the workforce, but they are the leaders. They have their own quarters. They oversee the gray aliens doing their work. Oftentimes, people will see an insect-like one standing off to the. There is no such thing as a corner, but standing off to the side, and they will talk with people more humanly than other ones do. Oftentimes, once in a while, I shouldn't say oftentimes, but once in a while. And they are the ones who are, I think, in charge, who are really running the show. Now, do they have other insectolins up there in the great beyond who they are kowtowing to? It is certainly possible. That is possible. There might be, in other words, we don't know a backstory here. We don't know what goes on behind the scenes. We don't know who these insect-like ones kowtow to, who they love and respect because they're their masters or something. But we don't know anything about what goes on backstage. In other words, hybrids, when they're on board, wear a certain kind of clothes. Hybrid garb, I call it. Everybody wears it, when they're children especially. Absolutely all of them. We don't know who makes those clothes or what they're made out of. We don't know who makes the nutrition. When hybrids are humanoid types and they eat through their mouths, we don't know where they get their food or what they eat. We don't know toilet facilities for humanoid hybrids. In other words, we don't know anything about the back areas of what happens when the places that are creating all the work for the workers. You know what I mean? The material for the workers and everything else. We don't know anything at all about that, and that's unfortunate. I wish we did.
That's incredible. And didn't Betty Hill describe seeing some type of giant mantis or mantid extraterrestrial in her encounter?
I don't remember that. Okay. I don't remember that.
Okay.
But Betty Hill is a wonderful person. She was obviously abducted with her husband, and she didn't quite know what was going on. The person who did hypnosis with her, by definition, did not know what questions to ask and did not know how to understand confabulation. So we have to be very careful with certain aspects of Betty's testimony. Just because the mind plays tricks and she's not supposed to remember it all and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, indeed. And have you ever noticed anybody or have you ever talked to anybody that you've had an opportunity to do these sessions with in regards to like microchips or implants?
Well, most abductees say that they have implants, but what they are, we have no idea. Now, a friend of mine, Dr. Roger Lear, specialized in taking implants out of people. And he had a group of surgeons who removed a bunch of implants from people's legs, their arms, their hands, their backs, whatever it was. And a couple of them were really interesting things. But he died too soon to make more analyses of it. I don't know what's happened to all the other implants. And he was unable to and did not take out implants that are standard procedure implants up through the nose, through the cartilage, through up into near the pituitary gland, or through the ear, through the eardrum and near the brain somewhere, or through a teardrop into a sinus cavity. All those would have caused have to deal with head surgery, and they did not do any of those. And those are the three most important places where implants are placed. How we would understand what an implant is beyond me. You're looking at very advanced technology. It's like in the 1950s, UFO researchers were heavily focused on propulsion. UFO propulsion. You can't imagine how many books are written about UFO propulsion. And it's like Alan Hynek said in thinking about this concept. He said, and he used a phrase here that every human being who is my age used 1,000,000 times, and then suddenly one day stopped using the phrase, never to be used again on Earth. Alan said, well, trying to figure out propulsion is like showing a color TV to Benjamin Franklin and asking him how it works. There's too many levels of knowledge that you have to go through to get to knowing how a color TV works. Now, when's the last time you used the phrase color TV? It has dropped out of the language.
Yeah.
Nobody ever used it. It was uttered by every American, now gone.
You bring up some good points, and I certainly thank you again for coming on the show. And I would like to give some advice to our listeners that are interested in checking out David and his work. Go to UFOabduction.com, UFOabduction.com. David Jacobs, if you want to look him up on YouTube or maybe check out Google. And I just wanted to leave this with closing. When you brought up these UFO craft and the people that are on these ships, whether they're extraterrestrial or, abductees, they're all doing something. They're all kind of efficient and they've got their own position and place to do something. I have talked to people that are very good at remote viewing, like Dr. Courtney Brown, Daz Smith, Dick Algar. These guys are some of the best remote viewers on the planet, and they remote viewed the Phoenix Lights. And if you know what remote viewing is, a session is done totally blind. The person that does the session has no idea what they're looking for. They just give the description. And they described these entities that moved in such a fluid motion. Whatever they were doing had a meaning and a purpose. The way that they walked, talked, and then the description of what they look like. He described them as these very tall Nordic type people. But then he said that it was weird because it seemed as if they were almost morphing into like a lion face and then back into this Nordic face. And he described the craft and inside of it and the rooms and everything, the layout. It was all just so harmonious. It seemed like they had it down to a science. Everything that they did had some type of impact, so they didn't waste anything, not a breath, nothing. It was incredible. Is there a connection there, would you think? Do you think that sounds pretty spot on?
No.
Okay.
Nobody has a lion's face. They don't morph into other things.
Damn it.
They can make you think that they're morphing into something else.
Okay.
That they can do, but that's not remote viewing. Remote viewing is seeing them, and they wouldn't be seeing them because they're not actually morphing. I would be careful with that. I know that people are sincere, and I am not against remote viewing. I remember the Society for Scientific Exploration and Dr. Hal Puthoff put on a fantastic account of remote viewers that were really, really striking, really amazing. So there might be something to that. But when it comes to abductions, you got to be real careful, real careful. There was a woman named, I can't remember her name. She was one of Bud's people many, even before I started doing abduction research, where a group of channelers, or maybe even remote viewers, I can't remember, got together in a room and they all channeled or remote viewed an abduction. All of the accounts were different, and none of the accounts were correct because this woman was an abductee and knew what was going on, and she said nothing approached it in terms of what was actually happening. But you also have to understand that this has been in the media for a long time now. It's seeped into popular culture. Everybody and his dog knows gray aliens.
Right.
And it's just all over the place, and it has been for decades. And obviously the books that both Bud and I wrote didn't help matters by keeping it secret so that we could study it more. But scientists don't study it anymore. There's less scientific information concern for it now than there ever has been. So I might as well just write my books and show the public what I've learned. And if they don't think it's correct, they can learn how to do hypnosis and do it themselves. That would be great.
Yeah, and hypnosis is pretty cool. Some that don't know what it is might get nervous and be like, oh, I don't want to be put under somebody's spell and go barking at cars thinking I'm a dog or whatever. That's stage hypnosis, and it's completely different. If you've ever missed your exit driving in a car because you were listening to music and you lost track of time there for a second, that is a form of hypnosis right there. It's just a different
That's
level
called welcome to the human race. That's what that's called.
Yeah, hello. Welcome to the human race. So, hey, this has been great. And also, I want to let our listeners know, if you would like to hear more about some of these cases, check out Walking Among Us. That came out just several months ago. It's got excellent reviews on Amazon. Also, you've put together a few other books. Would you just let our listeners know the name of those titles before we close out tonight, David?
Well, there's still three other ones that are in print. The Search, I'm sorry, God almighty, my brain. Secret Life, The Threat, and the edited book. This is edited by me, although I have a couple of chapters in it. UFOs and Abductions Challenging the Borders of Knowledge. We wanted that for the therapeutic and community and academic community. The response from the academic community was zero.
That doesn't surprise me. Those guys are like, talk about being assimilated by the Borg. They've got firewalls all over themselves. They can't accept anything that's not, written down on paper and given to them by somebody in the administration. It's been great to have you on the show, David. It was a real pleasure. And man, your voice sounds so familiar. Did you ever do any like commercials, or were you the Cadbury guy that did that?
From your lips to God's ears. No, I never did anything like that.
Man, you've definitely got a voice of the person that does some really cool commercials and stuff. So yeah, great voice, man. I appreciate you coming on, David. Thank you so much.
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.